Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, September 23rd, 2022. The House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy presenting an agenda named Commitment to America for House Republican candidates to run on in the November elections, promising a strong economy, a safe nation, freedom, and an accountable government. We'll hear from Congressman McCarthy, who could be House Speaker if Republicans win a majority, and talk about it with Bloomberg News congressional reporter. Democratic President Joe Biden also giving a campaign speech today, highlighting some of the issues he says Congressman McCarthy did not touch on, like abortion policy. The World Bank President David Malpass asked about the controversy over his position on climate change. It's led to some calling him a climate denier and calling for his resignation. In Ukraine, voting starting in some Russian military-controlled areas, referenda asking whether these regions should become part of Russia. We'll hear a response from the White House. And at the United Nations General Assembly in New York City, the Israeli Prime Minister and the Palestinian Authority President talking about the future of Middle East peace and the ever-elusive deal for a two-state solution. Now to House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy presenting an agenda that he says will be the blueprint for legislation if Republicans get a majority in the House after the November elections and Congressman McCarthy could become House Speaker. It's called the Commitment to America. It's got 4 headings of policy recommendations: an economy that's strong, a nation that's safe, a future that's built on freedom, and a government that's accountable, with more detailed proposals under each. Fox News writing, the agenda follows the playbook of the contract with America that helped former House Speaker Newt Gingrich win a GOP majority in the 1990s. He was a Republican from Georgia. Also, this from the Fox article, Congressman McCarthy came out swinging in his speech, accusing Democratic lawmakers of ignoring rising crime, decrying restrictions on parental rights, and promising to repeal the recent expansion of the Internal Revenue Service. Today's event was held in Pennsylvania at Monongahela, just south of Pittsburgh, in a warehouse at a company that makes HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning components. Congressman McCarthy joined by about 30 other U.S. Republican House members from around the country.
We've spent the last year and a half, all the Republican members in conference, going throughout the country listening to the challenges, fighting what the Democrats have been doing. And we want to roll it out to you, to the entire country, to know exactly what we will do if you would trust us and give us the ability to take a new direction for this country. What the commitment is a plan for a new direction. You know, I've watched this one-party control. And as we went across this country listening, we heard the same thing, kitchen table to dining room table to inside the factory. Can I afford it? Can I afford to fill up my tank? Can I afford the food, the milk? Can I find baby formula? You know, I ask everybody across this country, could you afford to give up 1 month of your wages? 1 month of your wages. The sad part is these Democratic policies has already taken 1 month of your wages. So now the struggle that you have is you're living through 12 months with only 11 months pay now because inflation is so high. We warned the Democrats not to do that American Rescue Plan, but it wasn't just us warning them. Larry Summers, a Secretary of Treasury Democrat, told him don't do it, you'd bring inflation. Steve Ratner, a Democrat advisor to Obama, calls it the original sin of inflation. And then we watched what they did to our communities. Defunding of the police. We got crime problems from Portland to Philadelphia now, with DAs and prosecutors that look the other way. We've watched what's happened to our border, the millions of people who are just walking across. People on the terrorist watch list. But now we're watching it create every community to be a border community. Fentanyl, the #1 killer of Americans between the ages of 18 and 45. That poison starts in China and comes across our border. Do you realize it's killing 300 Americans every day? It's like an airliner crashing each day. If that happened 3 days in this country, we'd say it's a crisis and we'd change it. But the White House tells us it's secure. Then we watched a Washington that uses their political power to go after people for their own political beliefs. We watched children get a lost learning left behind. That's what happened with the Democrats, because they control Washington. They control the House, the Senate, the White House. They control the committees. They control the agencies. It's their plan, but they have no plan to fix all the problems they created. So you know what? We've created a commitment to America. And we're going to talk about it today. We want an economy that is strong. That means you can fill up your tank. You can buy the groceries. You have enough money left over to go to Disneyland and save for a future. That the paychecks grow, they no longer shrink. We have a plan for a nation that's safe. That means your community will be protected. Your law enforcement will be respected. Your criminals will be prosecuted. We believe in a future that's built on freedom. That your children come first. They're taught to dream big. And we believe in a check and balance, that government should be accountable. No longer special interest. We should work for you, not the other way around like it is today.
House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy laying out his party's agenda, an event near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania today. Joining us now to discuss the commitment to America, as the House Republicans are calling it, Billy House, congressional reporter with Bloomberg. Thanks so much. An interesting combination. You've got broad themes in this agenda, but you also tweeted a quote from Congressman McCarthy that on the first day in our first bill, we're going to repeal 87,000 IRS agents. What did you take away from the speech?
I took away that they, in many ways, want to bill it as, and because its setting was in Washington County, Pennsylvania, as a package for everyday Americans, not something that comes out of the Beltway, and that's at least the pitch there, or the picture they're trying to depict here. So there's a sense, I guess, within the party that many voters feel the IRS was this boost in IRS. Proposed boost in IRS agents is targeting them. So we're going to protect them.
Those four big subheads of categories, where did they come from?
Well, they come from, to his credit, in terms of trying to get everybody in the conference involved. McCarthy created 17 some odd task force last year on various topical things to study issues and ideas that could be put into such a commitment or that is fashioned after Newt Gingrich's contract for America back in 1994. So this is sort of a combination or compilation of some of those ideas, and in that way, with the participants broadly reflecting the conference, he can say that this reflects a unity within his party.
A unity. At your article at Bloomberg.com, under the headline, there's this subhead, Freedom Caucus remains wild card among House Republicans.
That's correct. I mean, even as everybody, including, and I asked Mr. McCarthy this just a little while ago, he is running for Speaker, right? And this package might help have shown some unity toward that goal, too. He said, well, this has nothing to do with his running for Speaker. A lot of people are making a lot of that. But, oh, yeah, I am running. But it does show that there's that, but there's also this other undercurrent within right-wing members of the party that harken back to the House Freedom Caucus's heyday under the Boehner years, in which if they could get the rules of the party adjusted the way they want, they basically could have veto power on whether legislation can go to the floor, or even have a motion to vacate a parliamentary move to get rid of the Speaker if he or she doesn't do what they want. So that's there's unity, and then there's these moves by right-wing members of the party to take away some of the power of the party leaders.
We're talking with reporter Billy House. You mentioned the comparison to former House Speaker Newt Gingrich's contract with America when the Republicans got the House majority in the 1994 election. Compared to this commitment with America, what's the same and what's different?
Well, the former Speaker, Newt Gingrich himself, has pointed out one difference, telling us yesterday that this seems a lot more sophisticated. In fact, I think what he meant was it's a lot longer. It has nooks and crannies under the headings that lead to areas ranging from letting parents have more say in schools, and that should include under that heading transgender participation in sports and that sort of thing. It gets into some really fine issues that perhaps the former speaker back in 1994 either would not have gotten into, or for political reasons, or wouldn't even thought of.
The House Republicans have their broad category of issues that they want to run on. How does that compare to what President Biden and the Democrats are highlighting? What issues are they pointing out that the Republican commitment with America doesn't even touch?
It's a very good question. Very good question. Of course, the Supreme Court ruling on abortion has been one issue that's propelled within the Democratic ranks as perhaps one that could turn around what were dim prospects for their party come November 8th. In fact, Republicans have not even responded in this commitment to America on the issue of abortion. That kind of not mentioned it at all. And of course, Democrats have also highlighted the January 6th insurrection, election deniers, and this package also does not even address those issues.
Billy House is a congressional reporter with Bloomberg News. His story's at Bloomberg.com, and on Twitter it's at House in Session. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And abortion policy was one of the first things President Joe Biden brought up as he responded to Congressman McCarthy and this Commitment to America agenda from the congressman. President Biden giving a campaign speech today in Washington, D.C. at the headquarters of the National Education Association. It was hosted by the Democratic National Committee.
Earlier today, after opposing and obstructing everything we tried to do to stop progress for the last 2 years, the House Minority Leader, Kevin McCarthy, went to Pennsylvania and unveiled on what he calls a commitment to America. That's a thin series of policy goals with little or no detail that he says Republicans are going to pursue if they regain control of the Congress. In the course of nearly an hour, here's a few of the things we didn't hear. We didn't hear him mention the right to choose. We didn't hear him mention Medicare. We didn't hear him mention Social Security. So let's take a look at what Kevin said today. He said Republicans want to, quote, preserve our constitutional freedom. That sounds great. I'm for doing that as well. We all are. But look at what they've actually done. The MAGA Republicans just cheered and embraced the first Supreme Court decision in our entire history, the first one in our entire history, that just didn't fail to preserve a constitutional freedom. It actually took away a fundamental right that had been granted by the same court to so many Americans, the constitutional right to choose. And now nearly half the states in the United States of America have either passed a ban on abortion or will shortly. And in many states, abortion is already banned even in cases of rape and incest. A fundamental change. Already 166 House Republicans have signed on to a bill that would ban abortion nationwide. And the senior senator from South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, has proposed a national ban on abortion with criminal penalties put on doctors and put them in jail if they, in fact, violate the ban. So in 46 days, America's going to choose. If Republicans win control of the Congress, abortion will be banned. And by the way, it will be initially banned, but if they win Congress, I will veto it. But think what's happening. They're banning it in the case of rape and incest in many states. No exceptions. And they're trying to criminalize it nationwide. But if you give me 2 more Democratic senators in the United States Senate, I promise you, we're going to codify Roe. We'll once again make Roe the law of the land, and we'll once again protect a woman's right to choose. And the power to get this done is in the hands of the American people, especially the women of America. And no, really, Justice Alito said the women can decide the outcome of this election, paraphrasing a quote in the actual decision. Well, he ain't seen nothing yet. I don't believe the MAGA Republicans have a clue about the power of American women. Let me tell you something. They're about to find out. And folks, Kevin McCarthy also talked about, quote, longer, healthier lives for Americans. Again, sounds great. Who's not for that? Well, just look at what the Republicans are doing. Already, 158 House Republicans have signed on to a Republican budget that will cut Medicare and Social Security. Already. The man in charge of electing Republicans in the U.S. Senate, Senator Rick Scott of Florida, has proposed a plan to put Social Security in the chopping block every 5 years. De novo. No, I know this sounds like, but I really mean it. Look, go on the internet and check it out. They've laid out the platform. It means every 5 years, according to if they succeed in the Senate, the Congress will vote to either cut, reduce, or completely eliminate Social Security or bring it back exactly as it is. What do you think the prospects of it coming back exactly as it is? You've been paying into Social Security ever since you got your first paycheck. Well, then there's Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. As my mother would say, God bless his soul. Look, he thinks waiting 5 years is too long. He wants to put Social Security in the chopping block every single year. If Congress doesn't vote to keep it, it goes away. An affirmative requirement to vote to keep it. Now think of that. It's not just Social Security he wants to put up. He wants Medicare, Medicaid, benefits. Every federal budget, every federal benefit gets up and has to be voted on every year. De novo, just from scratch. So in 46 days, America's going to face a choice. If Republicans control the Congress, Social Security will be on the chopping block. But if you support the Democrats, I promise you this, Social Security will be protected, period. And I won't let any MAGA Republican take it away.
President Joe Biden at a campaign event today hosted by the Democratic National Committee and held at the headquarters in Washington, D.C. of the National Education Association. You can find his full speech and the full event with the House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy and other House Republicans unveiling their agenda in Pennsylvania today, both of them at our video library at cspan.org. The Federal Reserve hosting business and community leaders as part of a Fed Listens series today. It describes that series as an initiative through which policymakers engage with stakeholders to hear how monetary policy affects people's daily lives. This week, the Fed raised interest rates again, the fifth time this year, in an effort to slow the economy and get inflation under control, all without triggering a recession. Today's Fed Listens program titled Transitioning to the Post-Pandemic Economy. Some welcoming remarks from the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell.
These sessions started just a few years ago in 2019 in what turned out to be a very different time. They were valuable then, and we've continued to benefit from them as we've navigated the pandemic shutdown and the path to recovery. So we started with listening sessions around the country that brought together people and organizations representing businesses, low and moderate income communities, workforce development enterprises, employee groups and unions, community colleges, retirees, and many others. We wanted to hear directly how our monetary policy decisions were affecting people's daily lives. So then the pandemic comes and upends everything, the way we work, live, learn, and conduct business. And we kept these conversations around Fed Listens going. And we thought we gained valuable insight, which continues to help guide our policy decisions. And I also think we delivered good transparency about how the Fed works to the American people through this process as well. So these events have now become a permanent fixture of our broader outreach. And my colleagues and I I'm sure we remember each one of these events that we've been part of. They're really the real life embodiment of of our policies and the way they affect the people that we serve. And they do inform our thinking as policymakers. So we continue to deal with an exceptionally unusual economic set of disruptions. As policymakers, we're committed to using our tools to help see the economy through what has been a uniquely challenging period. The insights you share in these events help us to home in on the challenges and opportunities that are shaping what we might think of as the new normal of the American economy. And it'll inform us as we try to get there. So my colleagues and I are very happy to hear from our participants today, to host those of you who are tuning in to listen, and to do the work that we do on behalf of all Americans.
Jerome Powell is chair of the Federal Reserve. The start of today's session of the series, Fed Listens, it was attended by all the members of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. The first witness was Tom Henning. He is chair and CEO of Cashway Distributors based in Kearney, Nebraska. It's a wholesale distributor of food products to convenience stores and food service establishments in the Midwest and Great Plains area of the country. Here is the Fed Chair Powell asking Mr. Henning about inflation and his ability to pass along rising costs to his customers.
Are you able to pass these costs along? You obviously have been hit by, costs right across the board. And the second thing is really, do you feel like we're getting through this process? That there was enormous disruption to your business and many others, and all these cost increases and shortages and everything. Do you feel like, and I guess there's not that much progress with the drivers, but do you feel like we're getting back to a better place with the suppliers and the customers yet? Or is there a sense of progress?
I think there is a sense of progress. We're making the move, and I think the moves you make are extremely important. And I think that'll get us in the right direction. And I applaud you for it. I do think that we're moving maybe a little faster than what I thought in terms of the economy and everything. So no, I'm confident we're going to get there. We might be. The only thing I'm not confident in, I remember when the pandemic hit us, they said, in 30, 45, or 60 days, things will be back to normal. I think what we're encountering right now is going to take a period of normalcy. It's going to be probably 2-3 years off, 4 years off, maybe. We've got to get caught up. It's not going to happen overnight.
And on costs, you've been able to pass those right along? Since
yeah, we have. Yeah. And the dollars we work with are large enough. And the customers really don't have a choice. They don't have a choice. We can't lock in old pricing unless they've got contracts somewhere out there. We can't lock that in. And so they end up having to pay it. They're so voluminous right now that part of the problem is you don't know what the cost is. If you asked me what the cost of eggs were, I could tell you probably in a few minutes because someone just told me what they were paying here a little bit ago. But, it's fast and furious.
Tom Henning is chair and CEO of the food distribution company Cashway Distributing out of Kearney, Nebraska, questioned by the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell at today's program called Fed Listens. Find the full video at cspan.org. Wall Street today, the Dow down 486 to close at its lowest level, below 30,000. First time since June, but the lowest level in almost 2 years. NASDAQ down 198, S&P down 64. An article at Politico, World Bank President David Malpass will not resign, he said Friday during a virtual conversation with Global Insider author Ryan Heath. NGOs and leading climate activists have been calling for Malpass to step down after he repeatedly dodged questions about the science behind climate change at a New York Times event Tuesday. He said at the event, "I don't even know, I'm not a scientist." On Friday, Malpass apologized for those remarks. That reporting from Politico. Here is the exchange at today's discussion.
Mr. President, you've been facing calls to resign over your hesitancy this week to attribute climate change to human activity. You know that Al Gore called you a climate denier. You've rejected that. But there are still some confidence and credibility issues out there, and I want your perspective. So tell us, did you ever consider resigning over this? Why or why not?
Oh, not resigning, nor have I. we are making a forceful leadership job by the World Bank on climate. And so I think the unfortunate side was when asked, are you a climate denier? I should have said no. I didn't even really go in that direction because no one said that other than Al Gore. And it was pretty much off topic. You know, I was at a seminar on Tuesday where we were supposed to be talking about impact. And so I really wasn't prepared and didn't do my best job in answering that charge. Thanks.
Now, obviously, we've heard some stakeholders are out there saying you should resign, or they say sometimes publicly, sometimes privately that the bank is dragging its feet on climate change. But what about the shareholders? All 187 of your members signed up to the Paris Climate Agreement. You've met a bunch of them since that panel. Have any of them raised this with you? Have any of them asked you to resign?
No, none have. Look, it's clear that greenhouse gas emissions from human activity are causing climate change. And so the task for us, for the world, is to pull together the projects and the funding that actually has an impact. I've been frustrated with the world community because rather than looking for impact, they often say, well, the World Bank's not doing enough. But from the shareholders, there's been strong support for me, for the World Bank, and a recognition. You know, we did a record fundraising for IDA. That's our window for the poorest countries just last December, and I went to January a couple weeks ago for the in-person launch of that. The World Bank has its tools and instruments that are unique in the world and are fully recognized by the global community.
David Malpass, World Bank President. He's had that position since 2019. A virtual interview today with Ryan Heath, Politico's Global Growth Editorial Director. David Malpass is a former U.S. Treasury Department Undersecretary for International Affairs under former President Trump, and it was former President Trump who nominated him to the World Bank position. His term runs 5 years, so it's through 2024. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre saying today, when asked, we disagree with the comments made by President Malpass. We expect the World Bank to be a global leader of climate ambition, but she would not say whether President Biden still has confidence in the World Bank president. This story from the Washington Post about climate change and the United Nations meeting in New York City. Denmark will direct about $13 million to assist vulnerable countries that have suffered loss and damage from climate change. The first time in UN history a wealthy member state has pledged compensation for the consequences of emissions in the developing world. Washington Today continues in a moment.
There are a lot of places to get political information, but only at C-SPAN do you get it straight from the source. No matter where you are from or where you stand on the issues, C-SPAN is America's network. Unfiltered, unbiased, word for word. If it happens here, or here, or here, or anywhere that matters, America is watching on C-SPAN, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today. You can get Washington Today as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts or on the free C-SPAN Now video app. Turning to Russia's war against Ukraine, voting beginning today in some Russian military-occupied parts of Ukraine. The voting is on referenda on whether those regions should become part of Russia. It's happening in Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson, and the parts of Zaporizhia that Russia controls. The Biden administration and other Western countries have been calling these sham referenda. Questions to the White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre today.
If we can start with the Ukraine, the so-called referenda taking place in Russian-occupied areas there, is the administration considering any additional costs to be imposed on Russia or those who are involved in organizing those referenda, new sanctions or other sorts of responses?
So a couple of things I do want to lean into as the votes are happening today, clearly over the next 5 days. We are prepared to impose additional swift and severe economic costs on Russia along with our allies and partners in response to these actions if they move forward with annexation. As we said in today's G7 leader statement, the United States will never recognize this territory or as anything other than part of Ukraine, because it belongs to the people of Ukraine. We stand with our partners around the world in rejecting whatever fabricated outcomes Russia announces. As the president spoke about at the UN, as you heard from him very clearly, very boldly, these referendums are a flagrant violations of international law and an affront to the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity that underpin the international system and are the foundation of the United Nations Charter. We will continue to stand firmly with the people of Ukraine and continue to provide them with historic amounts of security assistance to help them defend their territory, to help them defend their freedom.
And then on a different topic there as well, these dramatic scenes of Russian fighting age males who are subject to those conscription orders leaving the country. Would the president support providing political asylum to Russians who are fleeing their country to avoid serving in their armed forces?
So I don't have anything to preview for you as it relates to your question, Zeke, about what we would offer. But you know, we'll say this: what we're seeing in Russia, especially with the protests, and what we're seeing with Russians leaving their country, is that this is an unpopular war. We have to remember this is an unpopular war that was started by the Kremlin, a brutal war that was started by the Kremlin, an unprovoked war against Ukraine. That is why you have heard from this president. He's been very clear, especially during his most recently during his UN address, that we will continue with our allies and partners to offer the assistance that Ukraine needs to fight against the aggression of Russia. So again, what you're seeing is not what Russia is doing, what Putin is doing. He's not coming from a place of strength. He is coming from a place of weakness. And now the Russian people are being very loud and clear. This is, again, an unpopular war.
The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre taking reporters' questions in the White House briefing room. BBC News reporting that Ukrainians have reported armed soldiers going door to door in occupied parts of the country to collect votes for the self-styled referendums on joining Russia. In southern Kherson, Russian guardsmen stood with a ballot box in the middle of the city to collect people's votes. The door-to-door voting is for security, Russian state media says. That reporting from BBC News. An update on Iran, the U.S. Treasury Department announcing it is expanding internet service to Iranians after the Iranian government cut off the internet during a week of a violent crackdown on protests. Those protests sparked after a 22-year-old woman in Iran died in the custody of Iran's morality police. U.S. Treasury Department saying, while Iran's government is cutting off its people access to the global internet, the United States is taking action to support the free flow of information and access to fact-based information to the Iranian people. U.S. cabinet members continuing meetings in New York City on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. Secretary of State Antony Blinken meeting today with the Foreign Minister of China, plus the foreign ministers of other Southeast Asian countries, the so-called Quad, and also with the Gulf Council, the Middle East. But early afternoon, Secretary Blinken was not at the COVID Global Action Plan ministerial meeting. Instead, U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, filling in, and she opened up by explaining that Secretary Blinken has experienced a death in the family.
Sadly, as some of you may know, Secretary Blinken's father just passed away, so he is not able to join us today. He very much wanted to be here, and he sends his best. And I know all of us are sending him our best and our condolences during his time of mourning. It is really my honor to represent the United States today in his stead. To our co-hosts, Foreign Minister Abare Bueno, Foreign Minister Kuwape, and Foreign Minister Momen, thank you for your partnership. To everyone joining us today, thank you for your continued dedication to ending the acute phase of the COVID-19 pandemic. And thank you for working to strengthen our global health systems so we can better prevent, detect, and respond to future health threats.
Linda Thomas-Greenfield, U.S. Ambassador to the UN, at a meeting in New York City on COVID response with representatives of other countries. Secretary of State Blinken tweeting late Thursday night, "My family lost a parent and a grandparent, a source of love and inspiration. My father, Donald Blinken, a member of the U.S. Army Air Corps, a U.S. ambassador, president of the Mark Rothko Foundation, chair of the State University of New York. Dad served his city, state, and country." Donald Blinken was U.S. ambassador to Hungary in the 1990s. He was 96 years old. A story from the Times of Israel. In his UN speech Friday, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas noted the positive development of Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid's voicing support for a two-state solution during his address the previous day. But he spent the bulk of his own remarks to the same body on Friday repeating grievances against Israel's government and security forces for their treatment of the Palestinians, as well as the international community for failing to protect his people. That was from the Times of Israel. We've got both speeches. We'll begin with a portion of the Israeli Prime Minister's speech on Thursday on Israeli-Palestinian relations.
An agreement with the Palestinians based on the two states for two people is the right thing for Israel's security, for Israel's economy, and for the future of our children. Peace is not a compromise. It is the most courageous decision we can make. Peace is not weakness. It embodies within it the entire might of human spirit. War is a surrender to all that is bad within us. Peace is the victory of all that is good. Despite all the obstacles, still today, a large majority of Israelis support the vision of the two-state solution. I am one of them. We have only one condition: that the future Palestinian state will be a peaceful one, that it will not become another terror base from which to threaten the well-being and the very existence of Israel, that we will have the ability to protect the security of all the citizens of Israel at all times. If someone believes that demand is too much, then look at the neighborhood in which we live. Look at Lebanon, a collapsing state controlled by Hezbollah. At Syria, where a murderous regime massacred 500,000 of its own people. Look at Afghanistan, at Libya, at Iran. You can ask us to live according to the values in the UN Charter, but you cannot ask us to die for them.
Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid speaking to the United Nations General Assembly on Thursday. The Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas spoke today.
It has and still is, through its current policies, which are premeditated and deliberate, destroying the two-state solution. This proves unequivocally that Israel does not believe in peace. It believes in imposing a status quo by force and by aggression. Therefore, we do not have an Israeli partner anymore to whom we can talk. Israel is thus ending its contractual relation with us. And it is making the relationship between the state of Palestine and Israel a relationship between an occupying state and an occupied people. Nothing more. Therefore, we will only deal with Israel as such. And we call upon the international community to deal with it as such as well. Israel has chosen that itself. We did not make that choice. Israel made that choice. Israel is launching a frantic campaign to confiscate our lands, to build settlements, to loot our resources, as if this land is empty and has no owners, exactly as it did in 1948. Israel is giving total freedom to the army and to the terrorist settlers who are killing the Palestinian people in broad daylight, looting their land and their water, burning and demolishing their homes, compelling them to pay for the demolition, or forcing them to destroy their homes with their own hands and uproot their trees. All this with an official protection.
Mahmoud Abbas is president of the Palestinian Authority, speaking today at the United Nations General Assembly in New York City. More from the Times of Israel article on his speech. President Abbas, they write, has seen his popularity plummet over his continued cooperation with Israel and his refusal to hold elections for over 15 years. He again insisted on Friday that he's prepared to hold a vote immediately but cannot do so because Israel refuses to allow Palestinians in East Jerusalem to participate. Analysts have maintained, though, that the decision has more to do with fears of significant gains by the Hamas terror group at the expense of his Fatah movement. That from the Times of Israel. This is Washington Today. Back to the White House, a large tent set up on the South Lawn for a concert with Elton John tonight titled A Night When Hope and History Rhyme. President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden will be making some remarks. More from the White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre.
Tonight, as you all know, we will be welcoming Sir Elton John, the President and the First Lady. They look forward to hosting him at the White House for a spectacular performance on the South Lawn. The President and the First Lady will celebrate the vast contributions Sir Elton has made across his lifetime as an artist and an advocate, and they are particularly thrilled to welcome to the White House an audience of around 2,000 fans and comprised of teachers and nurses, frontline workers, mental health advocates, students, LGBTQ+ advocates, and so many others. Tonight's performance has been organized and in collaboration with and is paid for by the A&E and History channels, network channels, and will air on television at a later date.
The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre. Associated Press adding it will be Elton John's first White House gig since he performed with Stevie Wonder at a state dinner in 1998 honoring British Prime Minister Tony Blair. At age 75, Elton John is on a farewell tour after performing for more than 50 years. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word to get the stories Washington is talking about sent to your inbox every day. You can subscribe at c-span.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.